Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue bringing you the story of CEO James and Diep. James and Diep once had someone who, in the past, stood on the opposite side from them, a true enemy. That person was John. Mentioning that name still brings back heavy memories for both of them, filled with misunderstanding, resentment, and layers of mistakes. There was a time when John was not only on the opposing side, but also the direct cause that pushed James and Diep into months of tension, pain, and loss. Words left unsaid, impulsive actions, and a series of wrong decisions all combined to create a deep rift between three people who had once shared the same path. Back then, everything seemed to be nothing but confrontation. Trust was eroded, understanding disappeared, and what remained in each heart was only defensiveness, caution, and hurt. Those memories were not easy to erase, because they had carved deep scars, lingering quietly in their minds. Yet time, with its silent persistence, gradually softened the sharpest edges. Along with time, compassion slowly emerged, not loudly or dramatically, but gently seeping in, creating space for people to look back at themselves and at others with different eyes. After John paid the price for his mistakes and stepped out from behind prison bars, he walked into freedom with almost nothing in his hands. With no past to lean on and no one to rely upon, he faced an empty and heavy reality. The first days of freedom were far from the relief he had once imagined, because that freedom came with guilt, regret, and anxiety about an uncertain future. It was at that moment that James and Diep became the first to reach out to him. They did not bring up the past, did not dig into old mistakes, and did not use history as a source of pressure. Their presence carried no blame, no conditions, no judgment. It was simply a quiet but steady presence, sincere enough for John to understand that no matter how flawed the past had been, a person could still be given a chance if they were willing to face it and change. James allowed John to stay in Diep's old house, a place that once held many intertwined memories of pain and joy. Over time, that house no longer symbolized hurt, but became a foundation for a new beginning. In addition, James let John use the vacant land behind the house, a plot not large, but sufficient to plant the first seeds of hope for the future. For John, it was not merely a place to live or land to cultivate, but the clearest proof of trust, something he had lost long ago. James did not stop at words of encouragement or symbolic gestures. He visited often, quietly observing and offering help whenever needed. He guided John step by step, from organizing work and calculating expenses to planning for the long term. Each conversation carried no tone of lecturing or control, but felt like two men sitting together, cautiously and responsibly looking toward the future. James even invested money, giving John a genuine opportunity, not as charity, but as trust placed with intention. He helped John start raising chickens, beginning with the simplest things, so John could rebuild his life with his own hands. Each chicken coop built, each day of repeated labor, became part of a process, learning to stand on his own, to value what he had, and most importantly, to take responsibility for his own life. Diep stayed by their side, saying little, yet her presence always carried calm and understanding. She did not need to prove anything, only quietly watched as everything unfolded, letting time and action speak for themselves. In that silence, relationships that had once been broken slowly found a steadier, more enduring rhythm. None of this happened overnight. It was a long journey, one where trust was rebuilt piece by piece, where forgiveness did not mean forgetting, but choosing to move forward. And from that fragile yet sincere foundation, a new path gradually opened, not loud, not dramatic, but deep enough for each of them to understand that sometimes, the greatest opportunity in a person's life is simply being trusted one more time. Thanks to relentless perseverance, steady hard work day after day, and above all the sincere support he received, John gradually found his footing again. His mornings began earlier, His evenings ended later, and his hands grew rough and calloused from labor. Everything became part of a new life he was slowly rebuilding. The small farm on the plot of land behind Diep's old house was no longer an empty, barren space. Little by little, it came alive. The chicken coops were built more solidly, flocks of healthy chickens grew stronger each day, and baskets of eggs were collected every morning, clear proof of the transformation taking place. The road to starting over was never smooth. John had to face many hardships that felt as if they were echoes of his past. There were times when sudden outbreaks of disease struck, wiping out entire flocks and nearly erasing his capital in just a few days. At other times, harsh weather disrupted every plan, threatening to undo months of hard work. And there were also long nights when John sat alone on the quiet farm, exhaustion and doubt rising within him, wondering whether he truly had the strength to keep going. Yet in those moments, John remembered the chance he had been given. He understood that giving up would not only mean losing his own future, but also betraying the trust of those who had reached out to help him when he had nothing left. That sense of gratitude became a quiet but powerful force, lifting him up after every fall. He learned to draw lessons from failure, adjust his methods, accept losses as an inevitable part of the journey, and continue forward with a patience he had never possessed before. And in time, his efforts were answered. John's farm not only survived its most difficult period, but gradually stabilized. At the beginning of the year, as the festive atmosphere of the Lunar New Year spread everywhere and market demand surged, chicken prices unexpectedly rose far higher than anticipated. The healthy flocks he had carefully tended for so long brought him results beyond his expectations. For the first time after many months of starting over from zero, John held a large sum of money in his hands, not from fleeting luck, but as the reward for sweat, perseverance, and an unyielding determination. That moment was not merely a material joy for John. It marked a turning point, allowing him to look back on the path he had walked, from a man once lost, who had paid dearly for his mistakes, to someone now standing firmly on his own strength. A complex emotion welled up inside him, relief, gratitude, and deep emotion all at once. And the first people he thought of were not himself, but James and Diep. That day, John appeared before them with a rare brightness on his face. His smile was no longer strained or guarded, but genuinely joyful, tinged with a slight tremor of emotion. In his hands was a suitcase that looked heavier than usual. When he set it down in front of James and Diep and slowly opened it, stacks of neatly arranged cash were revealed inside. For a brief moment, the room fell silent, as if everyone were waiting for what he would say next. John's voice trembled as he began to speak. He recounted the journey he had been through, the hardships, the moments he nearly gave up, and the instant he realized his farm had finally begun to bear fruit. He admitted that without James and Diep, without the opportunity they had given him, he might not be standing there that day. His words were neither flowery nor long-winded, but they carried all the sincerity and gratitude he had held in his heart throughout that time. John made it clear that he had kept part of the money as capital to continue his work and develop the farm sustainably. The remainder, he wanted to give back to James and Diep, as a heartfelt expression of thanks, a tribute to those who had not turned their backs on him, who had not abandoned him when he was at the lowest point in his life. To John, it was not merely money, but the only way he knew to express his gratitude and respect for the trust that had once been placed in him. James and Diep exchanged a glance in that moment. No words were needed, yet a very clear feeling rose within both of them, one of quiet joy and relief. It was not happiness born from what lay before their eyes, nor satisfaction at the material value placed on the table. What truly made them happy was the image of John standing there, calmer, steadier, and so different from the man he had been during his lost years. They saw in John a change that no longer lived in words, but was clearly present in his eyes, in the way he stood upright, and in his voice, trembling, yet filled with dignity. A man who had once been swept into mistakes and lost his way had now learned to work with his own hands, to be independent, and to cherish every small opportunity life offered him. That, for James and Diep, was the greatest achievement of all, one that could not be measured in money. Diep let out a soft breath, as if an invisible burden had finally been set down. She understood that from this moment on, the painful past could at last be closed in a more complete way. James remained silent for a brief moment, his gaze resting on John's face, as if making sure that this change was real and lasting, not just temporary. And once they were certain, both of them arrived at the same decision, gently, yet firmly. They refused to accept the money. Not because they dismissed John's efforts or his sincerity, but because from the very beginning, their help had never been meant as an exchange. James explained clearly that neither he nor Diep had ever expected anything in return. What they had done came from trust and the wish to see a person rise again after a fall, not from the hope of repayment. For them, seeing John live more honestly each day and support himself through genuine labor was already the fullest reward. Diep slowly shared her own thoughts as well. She said that money can be lost and earned again, but a true change in a person does not come easily. She hoped John would understand that the most valuable thing he had gained was not what lay inside the suitcase, but the path he was now walking, the path of patience, responsibility, and self-respect. James and Diep encouraged John to keep all the money and continue investing in himself. They hoped he would use it to expand the farm, improve the conditions of his work, and build a more solid foundation for the long term. They emphasized that stability does not come from a single success, but from maintaining the right values through each day and every small decision. James went on to suggest that one day, when John was truly steady on his feet, he might share with others who were struggling, not in grand gestures, but at the right moment and in the right way. Just as John himself had once been helped at his lowest point, timely help could change an entire life. James believed that when John was able to do that, he would fully understand the meaning of being given a chance, and of giving one in return. Diep looked at John with a gentler expression and added one simple wish. She hoped that, alongside his work and efforts to make a living, John would one day find his other half, someone with whom he could share peaceful mornings, everyday worries, and simple dreams. A true home, where he did not merely exist but truly belonged, was perhaps what John had been missing for so long. These words were not meant as advice, nor did they place John in a position of indebtedness. They were simply sincere wishes, born from seeing a man who had made enough mistakes to understand the value of living rightly. In that moment, there was no longer the distance of the past between the three of them, no roles of former adversary or benefactor remained. There was only quiet understanding, and a silent trust that John's road ahead, though still full of challenges, was no longer a lost one. John could no longer hold himself together. Tears streamed down his face, not tears of despair or pain, but of something very different, relief, gratitude, and the release of a man who was finally allowed to lay down the burdens he had carried for far too long. His eyes were red, his voice caught in his throat, each breath trembling as everything he had suppressed for so many years finally broke free. They were the lost years, the mistakes that could never be erased, the long nights lived with regret and shame, and the fear that he might never again be given a chance to start over. James stepped forward first, without reproach, without flowery words of comfort. He simply opened his arms and pulled John into a firm, steady embrace. Diep followed, wrapping her arms around both of them. The three stood together in that moment, holding one another in a quiet yet complete happiness. No words were needed, because everything that mattered seemed to be contained within that embrace: unconditional forgiveness, understanding born from shared experience, and recognition of a man who had dared to change. that moment carried a rare sense of peace. No noise, no drama, no grand promises. Just 3 heartbeats drawing closer, and a clear feeling that the cracks of the past, though they could never fully disappear, no longer had the power to separate them. From people who had once stood in opposition, on completely different sides of life, they had passed through enough pain to understand the value of holding hands instead of pushing one another away. Through James's steadfast compassion and Diep's gentle, forgiving nature, a relationship once built on resentment was slowly dismantled, layer by layer. Not through loud apologies, but through time, through actions, through giving one another the chance to prove change. John was no longer the man of his past, and James and Diep were no longer bound by the painful memories that had once made them wary. From enemies, they became people who could trust one another. And from that trust, a quiet but sincere friendship was formed. Within that embrace, John understood that he was not only forgiven, but also seen as a person striving to live better each day. James and Diep, in turn, realized that their decision years ago, to reach out instead of turning away, had ultimately carried profound meaning. Not only for John, but for themselves as well. For when people choose to believe in goodness, even at the risk of being hurt, what they gain in return is sometimes not just the transformation of another, but peace within their own hearts. When the 3 finally loosened their hold, the warmth in the air remained. No one said anything more, yet their eyes spoke for them. They were eyes turned toward the future, no longer held back by resentment, no longer haunted by what had been. The road ahead did not promise perfection, but it was brighter, more peaceful, built on very real things: forgiveness strong enough to heal, kindness steady enough to nurture, and trust powerful enough to let people move forward after falling. The journey of James and Diep continues, with challenges, choices, and emotional chapters yet to be told. Stay tuned for the next episode to see how their love story unfolds, and don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts about this story.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình nhé. Bây giờ thì mình đang trong phần edit. Mình mới làm đến phần edit thôi. Vừa làm xong phần âm thanh, chưa làm xong phần hình ảnh nữa mọi người. Mình phải làm xong hình ảnh nữa thì mình mới edit nó nhanh được. Mất cái này nữa. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo. Bye bye.